What's up, guys? We continue to be mired in the worst streak of my life. I don't even know where we're at this point. Start out 2-0 last night. It's looking pretty good for a winning night at that point. Oh, but no, you're going to lose the next 5 games. All 5 of the remaining games. You're just going to lose them all. It's just ridiculous. It's like, and some of them are really close and just falling on the wrong side of the number. Even if they involve big comebacks, it still is like, unless you get like the complete, like decisive blowout win, it's like you're not going to win any of the bets. None of the close ones go your way. It's so bad, so ridiculous. Some of the things that happened last night were just absolutely insane. Nashville Predators get outshot 18-1 in the first period. It's something that just never even happens. It's just what are you even going to do about it? Saros allows like multiple goals through, and they take him out of the game, I believe. It's just so disgusting. Albany, the line somehow crashed down from 7.5 to 4.5, which made no sense because I checked like the injury statuses and I didn't see any injuries listed in any of these college basketball games. You know, they're small conferences, so maybe you just can't find the information. But the information I think would be out there if you're looking at the injury report and it says no injuries. I would think that would still be the case. I don't know why they tanked down to 4.5, but that one won easily. They blew out NJIT, so that one made me look pretty good before all the bad started happening. Tarleton State or UT Arlington was up 5 at the half. That was looking pretty good, even though it was lower scoring than you want to see for a UT Arlington team because they're a team that likes to push the pace, similar to Albany. I forgot to mention Albany, a team that also really pushes the pace against a slow NJIT team. And if Albany was going to be able to take over the pace, which they did, that was going to be a good situation for them to cover, which happened. UT Arlington, the game was not quite as fast enough, but they were still winning by 5 at the half. So you're thinking, all right, if you have a good second half, you'll probably cover the number at 5 or whatever. You're already up 5. No, they had a really bad second half, and the final score isn't really indicative of how close the game really was. The game was close at the end. It was like if Arlington could just like maintain like the lead by a couple points at the end there, which they could have, then they probably could have still wound up covering on like some intentional free throws or something. But no, instead they completely lost the lead and it flipped the other way, and they lost by 7 or whatever on intentional free throws going the other way. So that's awesome. So it came down to like basically which team was up by a couple points in the final like seconds of the game there. It was probably going to win by that margin. So that was awful. And then the Utah Jazz, I don't even understand how this is even possible. How you can give up 50-something points in one quarter in the second quarter, and then you wind up giving up 84 points, I think, in the first half. Golden State scored 84 in the first half against Utah, and then Utah still was in position to potentially cover that game in the end. They had a really good fourth quarter. Finally, one of my teams has a good fourth quarter. It doesn't happen often, it seems. They got back into the game. I was like, holy shit, Utah's going to come back and like at least save me here. And no, they still wind up missing the cover by 1 point. Absolutely insane. Neither team in that game played any defense at all. I mean, they gave up 84 points in the first half, and they were still only down like, I don't know, 14 or something like that going into the half, which sounds bad, but in a game like that, that's not that many points really, because it was like the all-star break had already happened. Those two teams just did not show up and did not play defense. It was kind of shocking, really, but Utah still could have gotten there at the end of it and missed by 1 point. It's like, I'd rather have them lose by 20, just get it over with. Same thing with Cal State Fullerton, and that line moved in a direction I didn't expect either, and I didn't see any injuries in that one either. So Albany had moved down from 7.5 to 4.5, even though the power ratings had them as like an 8-point favorite. Cal State Fullerton, the power ratings, I was looking to have them as a 4-point favorite. They were at like -2 in the morning, and then it flipped over to who are they even playing? I don't even remember. Riverside. It flipped over to Riverside being a 1.5-point favorite by the time the game went off. I don't understand any of that. I have no idea what happened there. In the Albany one, by the way, the market read, like the cash percentage wasn't even on the side of NJIT, so I don't know what moved that line. And that one wound up being like, I think NJIT was kind of a public square dog, and if I remember, maybe I'm wrong about that, I forget. It looked like the market read wound up being like on the Albany side, and that one did not wind up being on the right side on the Fullerton one, I think, or maybe I'm thinking the opposite. One of them despite the bizarre line move, one of them still had the market discrepancy, the cash discrepancy being on the team that I was on, which made it even more bizarre. Like, how did the line move like that? I actually forget which of the two games it was. It was one of those two games when the line moved like that. But how Riverside wound up going off as a 1.5 point favorite, I do not know. Riverside had a decent sized lead for a bunch of the game. Didn't look good for me. Fullerton scored 10 points in the first 12 minutes or something, which is what are you doing, man? How is that even possible to score that few points to start the game? But then Fullerton made a gigantic comeback, and they took the lead in the second half, and it looked like they were going to do it. It looked pretty good, and then they still wound up losing, and that one I think wound up being the final score wound up being not as close as the game was either because of some intentional free throws there. It's just, I just hate all of it. And the hockey, whatever, the other hockey game, pretty sure didn't get there either. I just stopped paying attention to whatever the Vancouver game was at the end of it. I just was not even going to look at it. I still think the spots were good, and I think the spots are good tonight. We're moving on to tonight. We're going to go 2-0 tonight, man. Come on. I mean, I like both these spots a lot. I can't guarantee it, but it's a very short card tonight, and I got two plays. The NBA is off now for the All-Star break, so there's nothing to look at there. Hockey, there's only one game tonight, and I'm not getting involved in it. I don't know, it's Arizona Coyotes, and I don't even know who the hell they're playing. Not getting involved in it, though. It's a game where the home team, the road team, Carolina, is a pretty decent-sized favorite in that one, so I have no situational standpoint there, so I'm not doing that one. Let me see here. Yeah, it was Albany. I'm looking right now. Albany had the market discrepancy going against them when the game went off there. And they were the ones that wanted a blowout. And Fullerton wound up having the market discrepancy looking to be very much in their favor. So I was right about that. And they didn't get there. It's all confusing. I don't know what's going on. Tonight, let's go to it, man. College basketball is the only thing on the board. And there aren't that many college basketball games tonight. Game number one, you know how I do. You know what I do. You know how I roll. You know how I do. We're going to this Atlantic 10 game. We're going to be on St. Louis +5. The line looks like it opens 6, maybe even 6.5 with VCU as the road favorite. It's tumbling down, so I don't know if this line's going to wind up going back up at all. I think it might only just continue to come down a little bit. I'm not sure, though, but you can get St. Louis +5 out there right now. I think it looks like 4.5 with juice and 5 are kind of the consensus numbers that are out there now. I like it, even though I think Ken Baum has this line right around 6, but I still think it's fine at 5. Not that much of a difference between 5 and 6, really, even though 6 is an extra 3-pointer there instead of a 2-pointer in basketball. Not that key. 7 is more key because it's where teams stop intentionally fouling as it becomes a 3-possession game there. But this is just such a classic letdown spot, man, for VCU. But there are things about it that make it even better to play St. Louis here. VCU having to go back out on the road. What did they do in the last game? We know what they did. They beat Dayton. It was the win of the year for VCU, man. They beat Dayton, who's ranked and atop the conference. Dayton was ranked in the teens. They're still in the teens, leading the conference. Giant win. It seems like Dayton just can't win in Richmond, Virginia, because their only losses, I think, in the conference this year are at Richmond and at VCU, I guess. So VCU was able to get the win. Huge win. VCU's won a bunch in a row. Well, they've won 3 in a row, and they've won 7 of 8 or something like that. So they're on a nice tear. But if you look at who they beat during this, well, a couple of the wins are good. Dayton, Richmond, and Loyola Chicago are all good wins. So they did beat the 3 teams that are top of them in the conference. So I shouldn't say it's an unimpressive run here for VCU. It's a pretty decent run, but culminating in beating Dayton in a ridiculously low-scoring game, too. And it was a tight game. VCU had the lead for the whole second half, and it got really close, and they had to hold off Dayton at the end of it. It was a bad shooting game for both teams, very low-scoring game, defensive game, grinding game, which is weird to see VCU, the team that used to have Shaka Smart as their coach, playing a weird, very slow-paced game, one of the lowest-scoring games that you'll see this year. VCU comes out of there with a huge win. Now they have to go on the road to St. Louis, and they have UMass up next. They haven't played UMass yet this year, and UMass is right behind them in the conference, really, so That's a bigger game coming up next against UMass, really. I think they're going to potentially overlook St. Louis, who's second from the bottom in the conference, coming off the huge win over Dayton, the top team in the conference, and having UMass, who's right behind them and fifth in the conference, up next. This is a sandwich spot, man. I think they could easily overlook St. Louis. And not only are they playing St. Louis, who's one of the worst teams in the conference, they already beat St. Louis in the first matchup, although it was at VCU. VCU handled them easily by 24 points. So that could also lend itself to them not paying attention to St. Louis here, a team that they already beat. So VCU's in a letdown spot. I think they're in a look-ahead spot, so it makes it a sandwich spot. And they're playing a team they already beat, so that's more conducive to, or beat by a lot, too, by 20-something points. So that's all conducive to them overlooking this St. Louis team here. And if that wasn't enough, this gets even better, baby, because you look at their history against St. Louis here, going back to last year. St. Louis lost to VCU 3 times last year. So this sets up quadruple revenge now for St. Louis. So I think St. Louis is going to be focused on this one, man, because not only did St. Louis lose both regular season games to VCU last year, VCU also eliminated them from the Atlantic 10 tournament last year and ended their season. So, you remember which team ended your season last year. For St. Louis, that was VCU, who ended their season last year. VCU swept the season series against them and knocked them out of the A10 tournament last year, 3-0. For VCU against St. Louis last year, and then St. Louis had their one shot at revenge earlier this year and got blown out at VCU. So now they've lost those 4 games in a row. I haven't even looked back further than that. It might be more than 4 losses in a row, but this is at least quadruple revenge for St. Louis now, because they got swept in the season series last year. And the thing that I like the most, like the revenge that actually kind of matters, at least a little bit in college basketball, is you remember who ended your entire season last year. So I think VCU does have these games, I think St. Louis does have these VCU games circled. They failed to get it done the first time, but now this is at home at St. Louis. Is their final chance to do it, to get revenge on the team that ended their season last year and beat them 3 times last year. I think it actually makes for a decent revenge motive here on top of all the other stuff that I already talked about. So this is a really great spot, I believe, to play St. Louis, even though St. Louis is coming off a close game at St. Joe's, where St. Joe's pretty decent team and was a big favorite in that game of like probably 8.5 or something. And St. Louis played them to within 1. So yeah, you might think, well, is this going to be a hangover spot? I don't think so, based on all the other things I just talked about. VCU's in a spot where they could easily overlook this team, and St. Louis has plenty of reason to be focused here. The huge revenge motive that I just talked about. So I really, really like the spot for St. Louis. So that's going to be play 1 out of these 2. Probably my favorite of the 2. +5 St. Louis at home. And then the other play is going to be over in the Ivy. I think this is another sandwich spot. I like both these. We get home dogs in both these, man. I like Pennsylvania. I like fading at Yale here. And there are reasons to do this. I think this is a sandwich spot for Yale, man. They're coming off beating Cornell by 2 points. Big win for Yale. That was between the 2 teams atop the Ivy. Both teams were undefeated in the Ivy, and Yale beat Cornell. So it was the big matchup between the 2 teams that were undefeated. It was the first time they played this year. Both teams were 6-0 in the Ivy, undefeated in the Ivy, and Yale was able to get the win at home only by 2 points in a tough game against Cornell. They were able to maintain their undefeated status, pull into lone first place in the Ivy for now. And who do they have up next? Oh, they have Princeton up next. Second straight road game coming up next at Princeton tomorrow. Tomorrow night. They're playing Saturday, so they have to play 2 days in a row. They have to go to Princeton. They beat Princeton also 2 games prior to the Cornell game. They beat Princeton by 6, which was another huge win for Yale, beating Princeton, who power ratings-wise, I still think Princeton's the best team in the Ivy. Princeton's the team that won the Ivy last year. They were dominating the Ivy so far this year until they ran into Yale, and Yale was able to beat them. So Yale has Princeton up again next. This is a sandwich spot, dude. They're playing Penn, who's down near the bottom of the Ivy, only has 1 win in the Ivy, sandwiched in between the best 2 other teams in the Ivy, and Cornell and Princeton. This is clearly a sandwich spot for Yale here. Huge, huge sandwich spot. I think they're going to totally overlook Penn. And they already played Penn the first time, and they just played Penn prior to the Cornell game. So that was actually a sandwich spot. So Yale actually did show up in that game. After they beat Princeton, they actually were able to show up against Penn, even though it was sandwiched in between Princeton and Cornell. But I don't know if they're going to be able to do that twice, man. They get Penn two times in sandwich spots between Princeton and Cornell, and now between Cornell and Princeton. So they got away with it the first time, but I don't think it's going to happen again, man. They blew out Penn in that game, but they beat them by 16, an easy win there for Yale in the first game against Penn, which I think is going to put them in a spot where they might overlook Penn more than they would otherwise, because they just easily handled this team. They're coming off their big win over the other undefeated team in the Ivy and Cornell, and they have Princeton, who's probably still the best team in the Ivy, up next. Huge game there, and Cornell again after that on the road. So this is the down game in that stretch, man, against Penn, a team they already beat, and that also sets up a little bit of revenge for Penn, because Penn obviously knows they just lost fairly badly to Yale, so I think they're going to be motivated here when they have Yale coming in. Penn, they were in a stretch. That was their third straight road game when they played Yale. They just played 4 straight road games, so their road has not been easy. They're 1-6 in the conference. They've played 5 road games already in the conference. They've only played 2 home games, and they crushed Dartmouth and lost to Harvard, who's not bad either. So Dartmouth sucks. Easy win there, but Harvard not good. So I think Penn's being a little bit undervalued here because their road has not been easy. They've had too many road games so far. So now they finally get to come back home. Yes, they are off a game against Princeton, sure, but excuse me. Princeton, the game got away from them. It was close for a while into the second half, but Princeton was able to pull away. But again, just like what I said about St. Louis there, I don't think that Penn's not going to be like in a hangover spot here, even though they're coming off losing to Princeton and only losing by 7. Princeton kind of pushed it to almost like double digits towards the end of it. I don't think Penn's going to be like, they're not going to overlook Yale, who's undefeated and atop the conference, and coming into their house. I think they're going to be motivated for this. Penn's going to be ready for this game against Yale, especially because Yale already just beat them. And of course, Yale's atop the conference. You're not going to overlook the best team in the conference, and you're going to want to put in a good game. You're going to want to show up. So I like Penn a lot more here. And if you look at that previous matchup against Yale, Yale shot out of their minds, man. 52% from the field. Penn was only 37%. That's a huge discrepancy. I don't think that that's something that's totally sustainable. The game was actually pretty close statistically otherwise. You had the rebound discrepancy was only off by 1. The free throw discrepancy was fairly close. The amount of field goal attempts was the same. It was just that Yale had 8 more field goals than Penn did, and that was kind of the entire difference in the game there. Shooting a really high percentage of 52%, and Penn 37%. A little bit unsustainable with the percentages being like that. I don't expect that to continue to be the case at Penn. So I think that describes it all. That's what I like today, man. We got 2 nice home dogs that I think are in good spots here, man. So that's St. Louis plus 5 at home there against VCU, and Penn in the Ivy plus 6.5, I guess, at home. That's going to do it for me, man. I don't know if I want to mention any of these other games real quick, but I guess I would lean against Villanova because they're just coming off a complete annihilation of Seton Hall, I guess it was. But Seton Hall was without one of their best players in that game. Seton Hall had him back, I think, for the game they just played, and played really well in a game in a response to that. So, but on the other side, that Villanova totally embarrassed Seton Hall, and I think they have a bigger game, Butler, I think, up next after Georgetown. So I would only lean to taking the points with Georgetown at home there. Villanova probably feeling a bit high on themselves after an easy 30-point blowout of Seton Hall or whatever, almost 30 points, and with a bigger game against Butler on deck. They haven't played Georgetown this year, but the thing that keeps me off of that is just that Georgetown sucks, and I don't trust them. And Villanova's better enough than Georgetown that it gets a little bit dicey there, but I do like that. Ohio-Toledo is interesting because Toledo's coming off a double overtime game, I think, where they fell short at App State and played a really tough game at App State, going into double overtime. But Ohio on the other side, I think, is playing like their 3rd or 4th straight road game. So even though I'd probably lean against Toledo in the spot because it's just a really tough spot coming off that game, whereas I think Ohio might have played what did Ohio play? Did they play like a worse game? They both played in that Sun Belt tournament there. I think Ohio played a worse game. Yeah, they got kind of massacred by Arkansas State and gave up 100 points, which doesn't look good. At least when Toledo gave up 100 whatever points, it was in double overtime to App State. So Ohio's coming off of an uglier game there, but Ohio's playing like a 3rd or 4th straight road game. So that gives me a little bit of pause, but still, Toledo also has Akron up next, which kind of makes it sandwich E, at least it makes it a look ahead. Akron being at the top of the MAC and Toledo right behind them in the MAC. So that's a bigger game on deck. So I do lean to Ohio in that one a little bit. Ohio in a bounce back spot, coming off a pretty ugly performance in the Sun Belt crossover there against Arkansas State. Toledo, like I said, coming off a tougher double overtime game against a tough App State team and falling short in that game, and with Akron on deck. Could potentially overlook Ohio here, but I don't really want to be on Ohio either with so many straight road games. It's got to take its toll a little bit. So that's why I'm kind of off that one. And then, I don't know, maybe there are some kind of interesting games in the MAAC with some of these teams having Iona upcoming or coming off a game against Iona, who I still think is maybe the best team in that conference, even though they've not really shown it record-wise, so I don't know what to do with that. And then the final game on the card tonight, New Mexico, San Diego State, maybe the best game of the night. San Diego State up from 4 to 6.5, though, against New Mexico. But that line looks a little high, man, when you have a team that has a slightly worse record in San Diego State, laying that many points at home against New Mexico. I mean, the odds makers are telling you San Diego State's the better team. I think they are, but it's not really that significantly. KenPom only has them separated by 5 ranking spots, so he only has San Diego State winning this game by 5. They do have a strong home court in the Mountain West, so I don't know. So I guess I would lean to San Diego State just because it looks like too many points there. And New Mexico's coming off a tougher game where they went to the wire on one at Nevada, which was a tougher game than San Diego State's. Even though San Diego State had to come back against Colorado State, they made an easy win out of it. So that's going to do it for me, man. I'm Toad. Have a good Friday. Good start to the weekend. Let's go 2-0 for once, man. Peace.